I read 18 books in November, let's get right into it. First up, we read Jurassic Park. I actually started this at the end of October, but I finished it in November, so we're counting it. Jurassic Park, the book, really good, very different from the movie. I would say if you want a great movie, watch the movie. If you want a great book, go read the book. I think the way they adapted the book into the movie is very good for a movie, but if you took that movie and novelized it, it wouldn't make a great book. But if you took this book and did a direct one-for-one screenplay, wouldn't be great. So I think it's good that they adapted and changed it for the movie, and I think the book in itself is a very good, very different standalone piece of media compared to the movie. Secondly is The Book Thief. This made me bawl. I was just so into it. I think it starts off a little bit slow, at least for me, but by the end I was just like crying, man. It made me like a shell of a human after I read this. Fantastic. I see why everyone loved this book when it came out and why everyone kept reading it. I think they made a film about this. I'm pretty sure that's why everyone loves it. So good. If you haven't read it and you're like me and you have the chance to experience it for the first time, bloody hell, go and read it. It's great. The Tragedy of White Injustice by Marcus Garvey. I got to get my hater game up because that first poem from Marcus Garvey is just like haterade, and I love it. Obviously it's poetry, so poetry doesn't super appeal to me. It's just me personally. I never really got it. I never really got into it. So I do need to go off and read some of Marcus Garvey's prose and actual like essays and stuff. But as a starting point to get into the Marcus Garvey feeling, love it. Playing It My Way, Sachin Tendulkar's autobiography. Actually, I'm genuinely surprised how charming Tendulkar is throughout this. It's, you know, he seems like a nice guy throughout. He actually says a lot of stuff that personally a lot of people probably wouldn't say about themselves, even in an autobiography. He does note there are some stories he won't even tell because it affects other people around him. But genuinely a very charming book and a look into a fantastic cricket player. Six Machine by Chris Gale. Again, another very charming book by a cricketer. It is Chris Gale, so it's got that endless charisma. It's super interesting seeing his life and his history and kind of what made him into the man he was. Throughout the book, he's kind of very much how you expect Chris Gale to be, and even now after several years from him retiring, he still feels that same larger than life character. Darkwater by W.E.B. Du Bois, very great, fantastic. Personally, I'm surprised how close I agree with a lot of the stuff Du Bois says, because from my reading about Du Bois and Garvey, I thought I'd be more in line with Garvey, albeit I've not read anything from Marcus Garvey, and this is the only thing by Du Bois that I've read, but a lot of the points Du Bois makes, I'm like, yeah, still applies unfortunately today from when he was writing, and you know, his lessons can still be learned from us today, the sort of things Du Bois was saying back when he wrote this. So I highly recommend you reading some Du Bois as well as some Marcus Garvey. The Profession of Violence, this is about the Cray twins. I'll be honest, I simply read this because I owned it, as was the point of me reading for the last month and this month. It was okay. It was very repetitive. I feel like maybe just watching the movie would be more exciting than reading this book. I bought this book because they made a movie about the Cray. Well, they made so many movies about the Cray twins, but the Tom Hardy movie was coming out when I bought this, and so just watch the movie. It'll probably be far more engaging, and I'm pretty sure the movie is actually quite close to how this book is written about the Cray twins. Even just the structure of the movie is structured in the same way this book is, so just watch the movie. Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. Obviously there's the stuff with Neil Gaiman, so it is a bit but also it's Terry Pratchett. I don't think I've read Terry Pratchett, even though he was an alumni of my secondary school. I don't know, I just wasn't quite feeling it. You know, it was a breezy book. I got through it quite easily, but I don't know, I just wasn't really feeling the book. I felt like the ending just kind of happened. And obviously this might be down to, well, I don't know when Pratchett started getting sick, because this book is actually surprisingly a little bit old. So I don't know, maybe it's just not for me. Maybe it's the comedy of it isn't quite for me. I don't know why, but I didn't really connect with the book, which is a surprise because I know people love this book. I know people love the TV adaptation of it, but I don't know, I just felt like it wasn't quite for me. The Penguin Book of Japanese Short Stories, some of these were fantastic. The Banana Yokohama ones were really good. I skipped the Murakami. Some of them are a little bit older and just weren't for me. Some of them were a bit long for short stories, like not quite novella level, but not really what I would classify as a short story, but obviously that's not up to me, is it? So some of them are really good, some of them wouldn't. I think if you were going to read this, I would jump around when you're reading it. Initially I started reading it in order of just the way they were laid out, but after that I was I'm not feeling it, so just jumped around from some of the authors I recognized and some other authors, skipped the Murakami. And so yeah, it's you know, if you want a collection of Japanese short stories, it is a really good pickup. Before we move on to the second half of the books, I want to say to you about 5 of these books I'm going to pick out. You can get them from the description down below. That link goes to bookshop.org. Bookshop.org is a company that works with smaller independent booksellers and gets them a little more of a kickback when you buy through bookshop.org. So I'm going to pick out about 5 books and put them in the description for you to go and get from bookshop.org if you want them. Alternatively, definitely go to your local library. I love when you guys support local libraries. Hey, if you're enjoying the video and you want more suggestions, if you want more book videos, I'm on a quest to read about 30 books this month. We'll see if I get there. I read 18 in November, so maybe I will hit it in December. Subscribe. Like the video. If you want more content like this, I will highly recommend it. But if you like, you know, lots of weird obscure books, because that's kind of what I read at the moment. So yeah, thank you for watching anyway, let's continue with the video. Tahanu, the 4th book in the Earthsea series. I've made a whole very long video about this book on its own, so I'm going to link it above me and in the description. Go there to get my full thoughts on Tahanu. It's a brilliant book, in my opinion, the best Earthsea book. I've not read 5 and 6, well 5 and the collection of short stories, so I can't completely say that, but of the original 4 that came out in its own sort of time frame, like the best. It is the best one of those. I love it. It is a powerful book, and it is a book that I think is still important to this day. Le Guin is a mastermind, in my opinion. So please go and read Tahanu. Please read all of the Earthsea books. I'm going to put basically my collection of Earthsea in the description down below. It's 4 books. Go and get it. It's so good. The Wrestling by Simon Garfield. This is a really interesting look into the history of British wrestling up until about the turn of the century. Obviously, it doesn't go into the recent 10, 15 years of wrestling. God, I feel very old now, which has been mostly dominated by the WWE. And I would actually be quite interested in reading a book about the rise and fall of British wrestling due to the influence of WWE. Mate, I could go on about this for ages. I could talk about how WWE just destroyed the British independent wrestling scene and how it revived, and then thankfully the Me Too movement, or the speaking out movement as it was dubbed in wrestling, came out and got rid of many of the bad actors in wrestling that were doing some terrible things to a lot of the performers, and how that changed British wrestling as well, and how it is anyway, that's not related to this book. But if your parents watch World of Sport and stuff like that, this would be a great book for them. I chat to my parents about watching World of Sport on telly every I think it was Saturday or Sundays. It's just so cool, and then getting interviews with a lot of those performers that my parents grew up watching. It's awesome. Philosophical Trends in the Feminist Movement by Gandhi. This, again, I'm going to link to my video about Foreign Language Press, where I actually talk about how you can access this book for free through Foreign Language Press, and also get the free audiobook of it, either I think usually on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I don't know if they have anywhere else where you can get that free audiobook, but I'm going to link it here and in the description. You can go and check out this book completely for free and get a free PDF from Foreign Language Press. So highly recommend it. Very interesting, very important book, I think, to read, and a great way to kind of understand the different feminist movements and kind of where your thoughts align and the history of them. Insurgent Empire by Gopal. Fantastic read. Very interesting to see different parts of resistance against the British Empire throughout the empire and the different actors in it, and kind of how it related to how people back in Britain were relating to it as well. There is a lot of information. It is a hefty book, and there was a lot of detailed info, especially about stuff you might not know about. So like a lot of the things surrounding India I knew or I had a cursory knowledge about, but stuff like the Monterey Bay reaction in Jamaica I actually didn't know about, so then it was quite in-depth. So definitely one that I would have appreciated being able to read slower. I kind of did my first superficial read of it for this video, so I think it would be one where I would have to go back and really engage with the text to properly get into it, and then have to do like external research about it, but highly recommended. A Brief History of Seven Killings by Marlon James, Man Booker Prize winner in 2015. A really, really great, just experiment. Not experiment, but the way all of these narratives are weaved together throughout the novel to get to the end point is just incredible, because it's not just a couple characters. You know, you've got Aragon, you've got like 6 characters, but a lot of them are together, so when you're weaving the narrative it's not that difficult. But this is like 50-60 characters, all in depth. You get to know them, they kind of work like different points in time you're going through, and they're coming back to each other, and you lead to this. It's really great. It might be a little bit long. It might have gone maybe like 100 pages too many, but maybe that's just me. But still, just a fantastic just way of weaving all of these stories together. Calabar, this is about the first president of Botswana and him getting married to a white English woman, and the like political ramifications of that, not just in Botswana, or as in prior to Botswana being a country, the reaction of the apartheid South African government, the reaction of the British Colonial Office, and just how he triumphed above all of these external forces trying to stop him marrying this woman, and how those external forces played. It is fantastic. I think the movie adaptation is also very good as well. Maybe read the book, then maybe watch the film adaptation. I would say don't let Dr. Umar know you are watching or reading this book.
I beg your pardon? I beg your pardon?
Royals and Rebels, The Rise and Fall of the Sikh Empire by Dr. Priya Atwell. I said in a previous video, I personally know the author of this book, so maybe I'm going to be a little bit biased. But genuinely, really, really interesting to learn about a period, or at least a section of Indian history that I didn't know about. I know a lot about the Mughals, and anything about the Sikh Empire or the Sikh rulers has always been in context relating to the Mughal Empire. I read a lot of things by people like William Dalrymple. So stuff that is in this book isn't stuff I didn't know. It is not a huge period of time it covers. It covers, well, mostly concentrating about 50 to 60 years, plus some lead up to that, and some history about the Sikh people in India. And genuinely super interesting. So if you are interested in Indian history, if you're interested in Sikh history, highly recommend this. Just really great. And yeah, again, I do know the author, so I might be a little bit biased, but genuinely fantastic read. A very in-depth, a lot of information, so it did take a while for me to pass through it, because it is a lot of information I didn't know. So obviously that is that to consider. If you didn't know this information like me, it might be a bit more of a longer or harder read. Again, probably going to be a book that I have to come back to because it was my first read. Probably one I'd have to come back to fully grasp the information. A Thief in a House of Memories. This is a children's book, and to be honest, I think it's pretty decent for a children's book. By children, I mean it's probably aimed at like 13-year-olds around that time. There's a couple of microaggressions in there I didn't appreciate. This is a Canadian author, and I think it must have been written around the early 2000s, maybe earlier. So I didn't super appreciate some of those microaggressions, but okay. Yeah, decent enough read. To be honest, it was a nice break for me. I think I was reading a lot of heavy and not just heavy, but a lot of thick texts just to get through. This was a relatively short read. It's a kid's book, so the lines are spaced quite wide. So quite an easy read, which was a nice break for me, I think, especially because after reading this, I went back into reading difficult texts. So if you can get it at your local library or something, maybe pick it up. Yeah, it's like a fine book, I think. Again, I'm not the target audience anyway, so that's probably why. But yeah, it was a nice break from in-depth books. The Future for Palestinian Refugees by Michael Dumper. This is very much a book that is full of data and full of information. You're reading this, you are going to be inundated with a lot of data. You're going to be inundated with a lot of points and analysis and how to apply that data and how to apply ideas. So it's definitely more of a reference book. This probably would be a book I would say get it and use it for looking at like more from an academic standpoint, and use it when you're talking about different points. It's not a front to back read. I think most books like this isn't meant to be a front to back read. I would say you should maybe look at if you're trying to, he breaks it down into different parts, and those different parts, if you're trying to read and analyze and understand, go to that part. You don't need to read it front to back. I think that's kind of the way to use a book like it. It's more of an academic text. Palestine Online. The image I'm showing you is actually of this paper being turned into a book. So the paper I read, which you can get freely on the internet from the University of Amsterdam, I believe, you can get this paper, for the paper I read, for free. This image here is the book. So I think the author of the paper basically took the paper and turned it into a book, which is quite cool. I think a lot of academics do that. Go and maybe pick up the book. I'm going to link it down below. It isn't going to be to the paper that I read, but the book version of it, which I think is a little bit more accessible than the paper. I think the paper obviously is more academically focused. It's a very good read, a very interesting read, especially at the time it was written, compared to how the internet is being used for Palestinian activism now. Super like, wow, I'm reading these ideas that the author had then and actually are being used now by Palestinians and pro-Palestine activists. So this is the book that the paper turned into. Read that. I didn't read this version. I read the paper itself. I don't know why Bookmarks had a copy of the paper, of like the PhD thesis. I don't know how they got their hands on it. I would love to talk to someone at Bookmarks about that. But this is the actual book version of it, so check that out. It's probably going to be a little bit more accessible, maybe a little bit different, but I didn't read it, so I can't really speak to that. But the paper in itself, thoroughly interesting, just very, very informative, and like a great insight into what is actually happening now with the use of internet and when it comes to just activism in general. Well, that was all the books I read in November. Okay, so thank you for watching. Like I said at the halfway point, you can get about 5 of these books in the description down below for you to check out and read. You can also see all of my reviews of them over on Goodreads, but more importantly, you can see them on Storygraph. I am going to be transitioning away from Goodreads, so at the moment, all the books I read, I am updating both Goodreads and Storygraph. But starting next year, I don't know if this will be the beginning of January or the end of January, I'm going to stop using Goodreads. I'm probably going to delete my account, which I've had that Goodreads account since like 2014, so about 10 years. But I want to get away from using stuff owned by Amazon, and I really love Storygraph. I don't think it's the perfect website. I don't think it's the perfect app. I think it does really need some polish, but like the Goodreads app barely works on my iPhone anyway. So, and Storygraph has really cool graphs, and it's far easier to see those graphs than it is to find them on Goodreads. On Goodreads, you have to like go through steps to find them on the website. Storygraph, it's right there. So follow me on Storygraph. You know, there's a couple people who I followed and I'm friends with on there who will follow me elsewhere, but Storygraph, I'm moving away from Goodreads towards the end of this year, or basically the beginning of next year. And I will, going forward, only be updating Storygraph. And I know a lot of you actually follow me on Goodreads, which is really nice. So if those of you on Goodreads are on Storygraph as well, follow me over there. And if you want to make a Storygraph, you should. I quite like it. Again, it's not the perfect website, but it's getting there. and it's awesome. So, and if you want to get away from using Amazon products, it's a great way of doing that, and it's completely free. I think they have a plus version, but I'm not on that. And before we end the video, I'm gonna say thank you to my members. Members get the special shout out at the end of every video. They get to have input into my videos. They get their own special videos. They get access to special emojis and little badges next to their names. And I finally made custom badges for them, which I think are really cool. So if you're interested in becoming a member, hit that join button and you can decide for yourself. If you can't, if it's not something you're interested in, just you watching this video, just you subscribing, does the world of a difference for me. I thank you so much for that. Thank you for watching, and I hope you read a great book today.